Hey there, and welcome to the Critics' Choice Association's roundtable conversation with Oscar winner director Davis Guggenheim and editor Michael Harte on the extraordinary life of Michael J. Fox's still a Michael J. Fox movie, which chronicles his iconic career and his 30-plus-year battle with Parkinson's disease. They both join us now for this exclusive conversation with the Critics' Choice Association. Thank you so much, Davis and Michael, for being here and taking time to talk to us about this extraordinary documentary.
Thank you.
No worries.
I'm a little biased because I'm Canadian, and my love for Michael J. Fox started in my teens when I saw him. I had Teen Beat. I followed his career. He was an inspiration for me because he was that Canadian that made it to Hollywood and became this extraordinary actor. But watching this documentary, I learned so much more, and it gave me a new love and admiration for him. So I want to know, when it came to the both of you wanting to work on this documentary and tell his story, what was it? Why was it so important for you to tell the story?
Well, I came to it from a personal point of view. I had finished a couple of documentaries and I was in a rut, a personal rut, a professional rut. Felt like the best of my years were behind me. And I didn't know what movie to make next. And I started reading his books, and his books were funny and fun. They're extraordinary, these stories that sort of blew my mind. And they're also very poignant. And I was like, wow, could I make that movie? Like that would be very, very different from anything I'd made in a while. And I called his agent, and his agent said, sure. And I said, let's make a movie that's a wild ride. It doesn't feel like a documentary. It's a wild ride. And it starts in Canada. A short kid from Canada who wants to be the biggest movie star in the world. And it happens.
Yeah.
And so that's the movie we made.
Yeah, it's funny because you say a short kid in Canada, and that's the synopsis when you go on Apple TV and read about what the documentary is. It says a short kid from Canada who was army-based becomes this international pop cultural icon and darling in the 1980s. And right there, you set the tone that this documentary is not going to be like any other documentary. There's going to be humor in it. So how important was it for you to demonstrate that this wasn't a pity documentary? This was a documentary about a special human being, a special character, and there's going to be humor in it that's going to give you this newfound appreciation for his life.
When I first talked to Michael J. Fox, the best thing was he says, I'm in, let's do it. And the only thing he ever asked me from the beginning to the very end was no violins. I don't want, and I think a lot of people who might think about this movie think, oh, well, I know what this is going to be. Mm-hmm. This is going to be a pity party. This is going to be about a sad story. And there's this moment that Michael Harte cut in the movie, which changed everything in the editing room. I asked this question. I was like, is this a story of a sad sack celebrity who gets a debilitating disease and it crushes him? And Michael just sits there quiet. Michael J. Fox sits there and says, that's boring. And Michael Harte, who's this brilliant editor, puts that in the movie at the beginning, and you realize, nope, This is not that movie. This is a different kind of movie.
Exactly. The humor was everything. It really was. It's the most important thing in the documentary because you just don't see it coming. Like you say, you read the synopsis, and everybody's slightly familiar with Michael J. Fox, some more than others, but I didn't know. I'm a huge Michael J. Fox fan. I grew up with this stuff in the 80s. I was obsessed with Back to the Future and Teen Wolf and Doc Hollywood, you name it. I've seen them all.
There's a picture of him at a Comic-Con. He had stood in line for 2 hours to get a picture of Michael J. Fox in a DeLorean blanket.
I'm that guy, and there's a box that was delivered to my house one morning and from eBay, and I opened it up, and it was a hoverboard from Back to the Future 2, and I was like, who sent this to me? And then I realized that I'd done it myself. I got drunk and gone online and ordered this hoverboard. So I'm that super fan. So I know his stuff inside out. What I didn't know was how funny he was. I had no idea. And initially we had decided we weren't going to shoot interviews because we wanted to feel slightly, it wasn't a conventional documentary where you have talking heads interviews, and we just assumed that we wouldn't interview Michael J. Fox as well. But Davis one day did it and sent me the material, didn't say anything to me. He said, look, we got an interview, you have a look at it and see what you think. It was hands down not only the funniest interview I've ever heard, but the best. It was honest, it was wise, and it was witty, self-deprecating, but ultimately it's just so funny. And we knew then this is the heart of the movie. It's about humor. It's not just about family and it's about Parkinson's and movies, but it's about a guy who uses humor as a weapon, like
Yeah.
to disarm Parkinson's. And he did it when he was a kid with the bullies in school. You know, he used humor to get out of these situations, and you see it at the end of the movie when he's on Curb Your Enthusiasm. He's using humor to kind of flip what we all think of Parkinson on its head. Like, so it was easy to do because Michael Fox just gave us so much materials to make a very, very fun movie.
And he gave you so much material. And I'm assuming when making a documentary, you really have to be concerned on how much your subject is going to open up. And
Yeah.
were you surprised at how much Michael was transparent and how much he shared with you and the viewers?
100%. I watch documentaries a lot with my family, and I think what happens what happens after we watch documentaries, the discussion always is, well, did they really tell you what actually happened when this thing happened? And I don't think they really. That's always the discussion.
Yeah.
And I think that's what you want when you watch a documentary, is that someone is completely open. And I've never encountered anything like it. Michael J. Fox was completely open.
Yeah.
There wasn't anything that he didn't want to talk about. And I think it's because he's at this point in his life. He's got Parkinson's. He's 62. He is who he is. He's got nothing to hide. And I think when people watch the movie, that's what they feel. That he's in their living room with them.
Yes, that is exactly the feeling that you get when you watch this documentary. There are a couple of feelings that I want to touch on. One is you feel that there is never this feeling of fear. It's about this guy who ends up, driving to Hollywood, trying to make it, becomes poor, and then obviously gets this big role, this once in a lifetime opportunity, and he nails the audition on Family Ties, and then that's where his career skyrockets. But even dealing with this incurable disease, you never feel like there's fear in him. And it's very inspiring. And that is beautifully told in this document.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Another thing that I was very impressed about was the amount of archival footage that you had.
Yeah.
And Michael, I know that you are a super fan. You stated that, but how was it working on this documentary as a super fan and having all of this archival footage and actually choosing the right movie scenes and the right scenes in his career to tell this story?
It was great. I mean, it's a dream. I mean, it was the project I think I was always working towards, because I've worked on other things that have done well, but the Michael J. Fox story is something I've always had in the back of my mind, and him as a character. And so I had watched everything. Normally when I come into an edit, I'm giving a period of time to watch the material. I'd already seen it all. I'd seen his movies, if not maybe 5-6 times. I've seen Back to the Future. I mean, I don't even want to say how many times I've seen it, but I just know it inside out, 2 and 3. So I've read everything about it, and so it was kind of easy. It was just nice to get paid to do it this time around, to watch all his material by Davis and his company. And I think when we started to cut the film together, I was able to, we initially weren't going to we didn't know how we were going to tell the story, but it just developed, this technique developed where we were using Michael J. Fox movies to make another Michael J. Fox movie. Because that's what Davis wanted. He was like, there's no violins. Michael had said no violins, but he wanted us to go on a wild ride. And so it seems, in hindsight, it looks like it was a natural thing. But actually, if you think about it, it was like, we had never planned to do it, but it kind of developed into this, something that, I hate to say it, but we hadn't seen before. We hadn't kind of seen that trick played. And
it's hard to describe it. You talk about clips, you talk about archive, but what Michael Harte did for this movie is quite extraordinary. I've never seen it before in a documentary, and you're watching him in his movies, but it's him in his life.
Yeah.
And you got to see the movie to understand it. It's quite extraordinary.
Especially the moment where he meets Tracy and they're falling in love. You feel as a viewer like there's a camera crew following them and you're just following this reality show of the two actually falling in love. But you actually got those scenes from, I think the movie that they were in was Big City. Yeah. Right.
Paradise Big City. I mean, the thing about a documentary is you see it in movies all the time. You see people fall in love, but you rarely see it in a documentary. If you think about it, I've rarely seen 2 people kiss for the first time in a documentary, because those are normally very private moments. But because of Michael's career and the way it panned out, we have access to that. We're watching him and Tracy literally fall in love on camera. That's a documentary. So what happens is you're not watching a movie anymore. If you think about it, the movie breaks through that. We're watching two people literally fall in love for the first time. It's so powerful. It's so magical. And Davis had the idea to use strange magic underneath it. And when that starts to happen, you get the goosebumps. And I've never seen it before. I've literally never seen two people fall in love on camera in a documentary. Well, I could be wrong, but it's really special.
Sometimes in The Bachelor, people fall in love.
Yes.
But are they really in love?
Sorry, Love Island, maybe. I'm wrong. I'm a big fan.
Is that love or is it a different L word?
No. Yeah.
Maybe your next project could be a reality TV series, but right now we're talking about this documentary.
Okay.
It was beautifully weaved together, and I loved watching it. But there's also what I guess there's about some pressure when you're making a documentary film about a special person who's a special character. You need to get it right. So was there ever any pressure from the both of you on telling
Oh
his
my God.
story?
Yeah.
I felt it for sure. And I never said this to Michael J. Fox, but this is his legacy. You can't make a second Michael J. Fox documentary.
No.
This is how the world will remember him and understand him. And like me, I saw his movies and liked him. Oh, he's a funny guy. He's a very good actor. But I didn't understand the depths of who he is. He's a great storyteller, but also he's really learned something fundamental about life and gratitude that taught me something. And so I felt a tremendous pressure to get that right. I know you did too.
Of course. I mean, I was, like I said, a super fan, but it's not only that, it's as David said, it's his legacy. You get one shot to tell this story. Nobody's going to come around and kind of, it'll be there forever. Film is forever. And he has such an amazing career of movies and his advocacy, but this is, something the whole world's going to watch, and we're encasing his whole career into this hour and a half. If you don't get it right, I'm running for the hills. I was terrified, to be honest, until we had the first viewing with Michael J. Fox, until we showed it to him, and we were like, this is starting to work. This could be special if we keep going and get this right.
What was his feedback when you had the first viewing?
He loved it.
Yeah, he just
loved
said
it.
It was him and Tracy watched it together with their son Sam, I think, came for the first viewing, and that was the first time it wasn't the first time I met him. The first time I met him was at Comic-Con, but I didn't tell him that.
Did you really meet him?
I didn't. I did meet him.
It was like 4 seconds.
Yeah. No,
okay,
I met him.
Get out.
I met him, and we became best friends in my head. We were best friends.
He was picture 20,
exactly
245.
That's not far off. I had to queue up for a long time to get that photo, and then in my head, I shouldn't tell this because we're talking about the movie, but I went to meet him, and just before I met him, I had all these things in my head of what I was going to say, and the person said to me, "You can't speak to Michael. Just take the photo." And I was like, "Okay," and that was it. So that's the first time I met him. The second time I met him was at the viewing with his family, saying, "Here's what I consider to be the best hour and a half of your life. This is what me and Davis have put together." That is it. I mean, you know what I'm like. I struggle with any audience member watching movies, and I don't even.
Terrified.
Yeah, and I was just terrified. And the lights went down, and he watched it, and they came up, and he got quite emotional. I remember about his scenes with his father, but on the whole, he was very optimistic and had some really good ideas.
Yeah, there were some very emotional scenes, and I also felt there were some scenes that were very respectful too when it came to his family. There wasn't very many interviews with his children, but we did have a little bit of a glimpse into what his life is as a father and what the family dynamics is in that. And I thought that was really nicely and respectfully done too.
They're so joyful. That's the thing that I observe, even when the cameras are not there, when the cameras are there. They're joyful. They love each other. Michael wants to just be together and enjoy each other. And they, I think some people might think laughter is just fun. Mm-hmm. But for them, laughter is something that is an expression that's much deeper than all of that. Yeah. And even when he's having a bad day with Parkinson's, he can sit with his family and find joy. And I think that's the thing that people love about it. That's what I love about it when I watch
what they don't expect. They don't expect that.
Yeah. I would love to talk a little bit about, the movies that he's done with Back to the Future. And
Sure.
I know that your wife, Elizabeth Shue, was in Back to the Future with Michael J. Fox. And I'm wondering, did she give you any inside stories or any scoop, or I guess any moments that she shared with him that kind of helped inspire you with your path into the documentary?
She was in Back to the Future 2 and 3.
Hmm.
And didn't know her at the time. I met her after she was in those movies. And she always said what a wonderful guy he was. I hear this from everybody. Like, having made this movie, a driver. So I drove him to the airport in 1987. And some said, well, I interviewed him in 1994, or and I was his assistant. I was his agent. The world loves this guy.
Yeah.
And because he is this, I don't think he ever forgets that he was this kid from Canada, from Burnaby, Canada.
That's right.
And he never forgets where he came from. He has that humility about himself. He never gets ahead of himself. And that's why the world loves him, I think.
And I have been through every interview that he shot over 20, 30 years. So I see the moments before and after the interview start, when he sits down in the chair and he talks the interview before they start not rolling the camera, before they start the interview. And without a doubt, for 30 years, he was never not nice in those interviews. And the way he started them and the way he left, and they could tell his tone, and he's not putting on a show because the cameras are on. It's him. It's real.
Yeah. But there is a point in the documentary where he does confess that he wasn't always nice and he didn't always have the greatest attitude, and that did change.
Yeah, it's funny. In fact, you're reminding me of this. When we did show him the movie, there was a scene where, he's in Back to the Future. It's the #1 movie of the year. Then Teen Wolf comes as #2 movie of the year. So he's in the top. It's a kind of celebrity that you don't have anymore. He's in the top 2 biggest movies of the year, and he's still doing Family Ties. And he returns to Family Ties, and there's this footage that Michael found where he's getting a little bit full of himself. And he's talking to the writers, and he's like pushing his weight around. He's on the set. He's asking them to change shots. And after Michael J. Fox saw that first cut of the movie, he goes, "God, how'd you find that footage? I was kind of a dick." My next thought is, "Oh shit, he's gonna want us to, change it." He goes, "No, I love that." Because even and it sounds like we may be contradicting ourselves, but he was always a warm, nice guy. But I think being super successful changed him and made him and challenged him and I think that he loved that. He loved that the movie showed him flawed and struggling and finding his way, because and when he got Parkinson's, he was even worse. When he got Parkinson's, he started to drink a lot, he started to party a lot, he started to run away. And he loved that too, because that's a real story. Because in the end, he found his way back. He found his way back through his family. Found his gratitude, and I think that's why people find this movie so gratifying, because I see myself in it. I think the audience sees themselves in it.
Is it fair to say that it's also a love story and a testament to the love that he has between he and Tracy? Because
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt. Yeah.
Without a doubt. The first act is very much his story, and then in the second act, it becomes exactly that. It becomes a love story. And he starts to lose himself, like you said, on Family Ties. He starts to lose a sense of himself, and he's getting carried away with Hollywood. But who shows up at that point? But it's Tracy. And she brings him back to who he is. And it's the same with Parkinson's, when she says, "Is this who you really want to be?" When he gets lost in alcohol and he's on the floor after a night out, and she brings him back. And she's a very subtle hero in the film, where she just brings him back to who he needs to be throughout the film. And then his children do the same thing. And it's a love story between not just him and Tracy, but him and his children and him and his family.
Yeah, I totally agree. This documentary is so special on so many levels. Davis, I know you've worked on so many incredible series, from NYPD Blue to ER. Alias is one of my favorites. How does this compare to the other projects that you've worked on, and how does it make it special?
Well, I've made a lot of documentaries since then. But making this movie, I really drew on my experience as a television director. I was a television director for a long time. And this movie has what people say in our world is it's hybrid. It's a little bit of a documentary, it's a little bit of a movie. And we pulled in all sorts of elements that Michael Harte and I didn't know would work or not. There are reenactments that you don't typically see in a documentary. Michael uses footage from Michael J. Fox's movies in ways and for a while you kind of could forget that this is actually even a documentary. And
Mhm.
when we made it, we actually didn't know if people would think
I definitely didn't.
like you can't do this.
No, I know.
And then when we showed it, we started showing it. We showed it to Sundance and at South by Southwest and other places. The world just like falls for it, and to be able to take what the rules are and push them a little bit in a different direction, that's really fun,
Yeah.
especially when it's a story that people can embrace.
Absolutely. And what was the pitch like? I mean, I'm sure you had this idea, you pitched it to Michael J. Fox, he said sure, but what was the pitch like when you presented it to Apple TV Plus?
Thank you for asking. I said I want to take people on a wild ride, and I want them to forget they're watching a documentary. I want them to feel like they're watching a Michael J. Fox movie about Michael J. Fox. I want a big music, like we have music from the Beastie Boys
Yeah.
Yeah.
and
In excess.
In Excess and
Yeah.
and
Kenny Loggins.
Kenny Loggins. We have a big score from John Powell, the guy who did
Yeah.
Born Identity and How to Train Your Dragon. We wanted just to be a fun, wild ride, and Apple didn't flinch. They were like, "Great, go for it. No, don't hold back. Full throttle," and that's what we did. And
It, yeah, it was so nostalgic. And now that you mentioned the soundtrack, were those some of Michael's favorite soundtracks to his life?
he sent me a playlist of his favorite music, and it was an inspiration for that. But Michael picked a lot of the music. I
I
picked.
picked some. Davis's daughters picked some as well. Agnes, this is true, and I was like, really? And then we put it in the movie. I was like, she's so right. This works a treat. Like,
Yeah,
she
yeah,
was
yeah.
finding tracks, and Davis's family were involved a lot in the movie. Not just his wife would watch. Elizabeth would watch. Lisa would watch some cuts, but his son and his two daughters would help us watch it.
My daughter put in this Kenny Loggins song, and if I was told her like if I was she's 17. If I was 17 and I told myself you're putting Kenny Loggins in a movie, I'd be like, what happened to you?
Yeah.
You lost your way.
Yeah.
But it's so good.
Oh, it works a treat.
Yeah, yeah.
It's so good. As a child who grew up in the 80s, I thought this was an amazing documentary. It brought me back to my childhood. It brought me back to my crush on Michael J. Fox and posters up on my wall and Teen Beat, and obviously, going through the stages of his career. So thank you so much for this incredible ride. It's been wonderful. You are nominated for 7 Emmy nominations. So congratulations on that, and all the best of luck to the both of you. And we are wishing for the best. And if you still have not seen still a Michael J. Fox movie, it is streaming on Apple TV Plus. See it. It will change your life. It is an incredible, epic film about an iconic actor. And I thank the both of you so much for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you so much. Goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.